One of my favorite things to use when it's time to finish a piece, especially when I want it to darken, is shoe polish. And I've used shoe polish on tons of stuff. It actually works great on metal to make it look like old brass. But we're going to use it today to just create a little more depth in our piece. So I'm going to just kind of test this out and see where I want the darker pieces. I've kind of ignored this top edge here except for the black splashes, so I'm going to put a little on here and see how I like it. It's actually going on pretty good. It's a little bit darker than I want it to be, so what I'm going to do is just kind of play with it a little bit here. See how it kind of just smears in and looks like it's been there a while. I like that, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to cover it completely. I still want it to look a little messy so it doesn't look like it's something I just painted on there. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on pretty liberally. And again, it'll be darker in some spots than in others. What you want to do is to create kind of some dimension and depth. So I'm going to just rub that in here and there and let it stay darker in some places and lighter in others. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this whole side here. And again, I'm doing it just on this center ledge because I've kind of ignored it, and it's probably one of the most yellow, bright yellow spots of this. Now I'm not going to be able to get completely down in that ledge, so I'm just going to put some out on my board and I'm just going to run it in there. There's a little bit of black in my brush, which is just fine. We'll just kind of mix it in with that a little bit. And we're just going to smear that around. And I'm going to do just the top, the face of this right now. I'll do the edges later. So I just don't want that to look unnatural. So what this is really supposed to look like is one of the layers that somebody painted this that just kind of got left showing through. So I like that, and because that's looking so good on there, I'm going to take a little bit more of this on my brush. I'm going to wipe off some of the black so I get more of just the brown. Come on. Okay, and then this is going to go on this very top ledge. I want to leave this gray stripe here. So this one, I'm going to put quite a bit of it on here, and then I'm going to add some of the paint from my wall and just mix that into kind of its own new color. A little more of that in there. This way I can bring in a little bit of the wall so it starts blending into where it's going to be hung. Now this I'm not putting on thick. This I'm going to do kind of just a random drag, but I don't want those creases to show too brightly. So we'll just kind of go over this just a little more here. And it's okay if each time you mix a little it's not the same. We don't want it to always look the same. We want it to look like it's had... Okay, we've let the watercolor dry a little bit on there, and I like the way this is beginning to look. It's starting to get the age and the character. The thing is with this piece for me is this is the kind of orange color that's on the wall, and this is way too much yellow. I do want a little yellow, but this is too bright. So now that I have some age on it, we're going to go on to the next stage of finishing this thing up. So I know that this bottom piece, because it's going to hang over this window, I know that I'm going to see this bottom piece. So it's really important. The top piece is going to be high enough that you can't really see it. So I'm pretty much going to just leave it the basic yellow. I've done a little aging on there, but not a lot. So this is basically the base layer of this. All right, a lot of people believe strongly in wax. I don't use wax. I don't think it makes sense. Wears off, collects dust. Once I have a piece done, I don't really want to go back and do anything else to it. So I use stain, just regular wood stain, and I don't even really know what color this is. It's kind of a dark color. And some people swear you can't use stain over paint. I do it all the time. I color layer. And so here goes nothing. This is going to be probably one of the final coats on this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and just start laying it in. And I want this on every inch of this. I want the whole piece to get stain on it. And I'll do it in sections. I'll do this section here to show you. I want it in everything. So some of those little cracks and crevices that we didn't actually get any paint into now will absorb the stain. So okay, as we wipe this off, we'll be able to see the other colors underneath. And you can wipe off as much or as little as you'd like. Everybody knows how that works. And see, as you can see, we start seeing the different depths and layers of color here. Some of those blacks are going to come through. Some of the yellows are going to come through. That gray is going to come through. Some of the white's going to come through. And I'm going to use a toothbrush inside these to get out what I want. Although they actually look kind of cool, darker, so we'll just get out of there whatever we can. And then you can always go back to and either sand or speckle some of this back on. See? So this is kind of the most important part because this is kind of the finish piece. Now I've done these before where I've gotten too much stain on and have actually went back with paint thinner and worked some of it off. But I think this is going to turn out just fine. I'll go ahead and finish this up and show you when it's all done. When it comes to sanding after you have your stain and your paint on, I like to do it before it gets completely dry. So try to do it, within the same day. If you wait till the next day, it's going to be a little bit harder, and it doesn't seem to give you the exact same effect. This is one of my favorite things to use when doing this kind of sanding. If you go get a pedicure, they send this stuff home with you. And I used to just have them throw it away, and then I figured out that it works so great for these projects. So this emery board is really, really, really gritty. This one, this little sponge thing, is a little bit finer. So together they work great on different spots of your project. So I'm going to use this one first. Keep in mind that my point is to go back with some of that blue-gray. So I'm going to leave some places just sanded off, and then some places are going to be specifically sanded to add the blue-gray. So you can see, you can just go in and hit. I really like to knock off edges. That's one of my favorite things to do on a piece, is to just knock those edges off. And I'm going to use, what am I going to use here? I'm probably going to use this to keep some of that sanded off paint and wood, because I don't want it to stick to the stain that still hasn't completely dried. So first I'm just going to knock off some of these edges on these teeth. That's going to add just a little more natural aging to it, and it'll show some of that layer underneath there. So you hit those wherever it strikes your fancy. And the original gray blue was in these pieces, right inside here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that down a little bit. And by pull down, I just mean pulling off some of the finish on there. So that's why this piece is so cool. You can actually just put it right inside there, and you don't have to try to wrap sandpaper or get out your Dremel or anything like that. And this is going to be kind of like everything else we were doing, just kind of a hit and miss thing. So there's really no specific plan, except that I like edges to be knocked down. So I'm going to do probably more of the edges than I did when I originally sanded this. And I'll like the effect when that gray paint goes in to some of those spaces. So we'll just hit this wherever. Remember to keep that dust knocked off, because the stain is still a little bit wet and you don't want it to glob on there, because we'll just have to come back and sand it off. So just to show you, like, this little piece fits really nice into some of these crevices, and it doesn't sand off as much, so you can get a lighter effect with this piece. And you can do big areas, small areas. There's no right or wrong. Some of these darker areas I'm going to leave darker because I like them. And because this is got the corners on it, getting up underneath, like right in there, works really well. And then because I like the gray, I'm going to sand off some of the stain off that, and we'll be enhancing that a little bit as we go. And then this is the blue-gray stripe here too, so I'm taking some of that off. So I'm going to go ahead and get all this sanded, and then we'll go in and add the color. Okay, I think I'm pretty much done with this piece. I went ahead and did all of the staining and wiping the stain back. So here's how it's looking, and next to the wall color, it's way better. I do think I like the kind of gray color in it, so I may go in and add a little bit more of that and do some sanding. But this is what it looks like when that step is done. And I'll kind of zoom in here so you can see the age underneath the stain and the different layers. So you can still see some of that yellow, but it's not quite so bright. And the bottom of it we left yellow with just some interesting stain and sanding on it. So I am going to add a little more of that blue-gray and maybe a little sanding to it. So we'll move on to that next. Okay, I did add a little more of the gray and sanded just a little, but pretty much left it as it was the last time we've seen it. So here it is, hanging on the wall, and I'll zoom in here so you can see some of the detail but I really like the way it turned out, and everybody that sees it thinks it's part of my 100-year-old house, which is wonderful. So I'll give you kind of a quick zoom here. See, underneath there is where that one of the drips was. There's another one. I think it turned out great. Go back a little bit so you can see. And I just set a couple things on there to kind of give it some definition. So there it is, the final piece. I love it. I haven't actually placed it where it's going to go yet in my house, but all that detail work actually shows up brilliantly on there. It looks like years and years of layering and aging, which is exactly what we were going for. So again, this is Patti at reinvintagejunkie.com. Be sure and leave a comment, and thanks for tuning in.